My name is Maya Sterling, and I was 28 the day my own father mocked me in a lawyer's office. We were there for the reading of my grandfather's will. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, looked at me, and said I had inherited Lot 4B, a tiny dirt strip. The room erupted. My dad leaned forward, smirking, and said it loud enough for everyone. "You wasted your years on a dying old man, now you get the gutter." I didn't scream, I smiled, tucked the useless deed into my purse and walked out. What none of them realized was that the dirt had a hidden border on it. My grandfather had spent his final days setting a trap they couldn't escape. Just months later, I knew exactly how to ruin his empire. If you've ever been the family scapegoat treated like dirt, this one is for you. Drop a quick comment and be sure to subscribe. St. Jude Medical Center, room 412. The clock on the pale wall showed exactly 4:15 p.m. It was Tuesday, November 7th, 2023. Outside, a cold autumn rain hit the glass, but inside, the only sound was the slow, steady beep of Grandpa William's heart monitor. I sat in the hard plastic chair beside his bed. My back ached. I was wearing the same gray, oversized sweater I had worn for 2 days. My hands smelled like strong rubbing alcohol and cheap hospital soap. For the last 4 years, this had been my life. I was 28 years old, a freelance graphic designer who worked late into the night just so I could spend my days taking care of my grandfather. The heavy wooden door pushed open. My father, Arthur Sterling, walked in. He was wearing a dark, perfectly pressed suit. Not a single gray hair on his head was out of place. Right behind him was my older brother, Ryan. Ryan was checking his phone, his expensive gold watch shining under the bright hospital lights. "Maya," my dad said. His voice was smooth, deep, and perfectly calm. It was the voice of a man who was respected by everyone in our town. He was the CEO of Sterling Supplies, a man who donated to charities and smiled for the local newspaper. But his eyes were cold as they moved over me. "You look like a mess. Please brush your hair. What will the nursing staff think of this family if they see you looking like a homeless person?" He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I had slept. "I'm just tired, Dad," I said quietly, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't wake Grandpa. I was up at 3 a.m. giving him his pain medicine. My dad sighed. It was a long, heavy sigh that he always used to make me feel small. "We all make sacrifices, Maya. I am running a company to keep a roof over our heads. Ryan here just closed a massive deal at Crestview Financial. He took time out of his very busy schedule to be here. We do our duty for the family. You don't need to complain about yours." I looked down at my hands. Duty. That was his favorite word. In my father's eyes, he was the hero of the family, the strong provider. He truly believed he was a good man. He believed his harsh words were just tough love meant to make me stronger. But the truth was different. I was the scapegoat. If the house was messy, it was my fault. If Grandpa got a fever, I was careless. Ryan, on the other hand, was the golden child. Ryan could do no wrong. "Hey, Squirt," Ryan said, not even looking up from his phone. "Did you move my Tesla in the parking lot? I left the keys with the valet, but I don't want it getting scratched." "No, Ryan, I've been sitting right here since yesterday," I answered, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. Just then, Nurse Sarah walked into the room to check Grandpa's IV bag. Instantly, my father's whole body language changed. The coldness vanished. He put on a warm, charming smile. "Good afternoon, Sarah," my dad said, his voice dripping with kindness. "Thank you for taking such wonderful care of my father. We are just so worried about him. It breaks my heart to see him like this." "You have a lovely family, Mr. Sterling," Nurse Sarah smiled back, completely fooled by his act. "You are very lucky. Your son and daughter are so devoted." "Family is everything," my dad said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. He squeezed it tightly. A little too tightly. It hurt, but I didn't make a sound. "We stick together. That is how I raised them." When the nurse left, his hand dropped from my shoulder like I was made of dirt. The warm smile faded instantly. He looked at his watch. "We can only stay for 10 minutes, Dad announced. "I have a dinner meeting at 6 p.m. with the zoning board. Important people, Maya. People who actually build the future of this city." He looked at the sleeping old man on the bed. "He is asleep anyway. There is no point in just standing here." "He can still hear you," I whispered, feeling a lump in my throat. "The doctor said hearing is the last thing to go." "Don't be overly dramatic, Maya," Dad replied, fixing his tie in the mirror above the small sink. "It doesn't suit you. Just make sure you call me if anything changes, and please clean yourself up before you walk through the lobby." Without another word, they left. The room felt empty, yet somehow lighter. I turned back to Grandpa William. His eyes were closed, but a single tear slipped down his wrinkled cheek and soaked into the white pillow. He had heard everything. I reached out and held his fragile, cold hand. "It's okay, Grandpa," I whispered, wiping the tear away with my thumb. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He weakly squeezed my fingers. It was Tuesday. He would be gone by Friday. And the fragile fake piece of the Sterling family was about to shatter into a million sharp pieces. Grandpa William passed away on Friday, November 10th, 2023, at exactly 6:14 a.m. I was holding his hand when the monitor went flat. My dad and Ryan did not arrive at the hospital until 2 hours later. At the funeral, Dad played his part perfectly. He gave a beautiful, tearful speech about family values. Everyone in our town hugged him, telling him how strong and brave he was. I stood in the back row, completely invisible in my simple black dress. Now, it was Monday, December 4th, 2023. The time was exactly 10 a.m. We were sitting in the very cold, very expensive office of Harrison & Cole law firm in downtown. The room smelled of old paper, expensive leather, and bitter black coffee. The only sound was the heavy ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Mr. Harrison, a serious man with thick glasses, sat behind a massive mahogany desk. He held a thick yellow folder in his hands. It was time to read Grandpa's will. My heart beat heavily in my chest. I did not care about becoming rich, but Grandpa had promised me many times that he would leave me the old farmhouse. He always said, "Maya, you will always have a safe place to rest your head." I had given up my city apartment and put my graphic design career on hold for 4 years to bathe him, feed him, and comfort him when he cried from pain. I just needed a small place to start my life over. "Let us begin," Mr. Harrison said. He cleared his throat and started reading the boring legal terms. Then, he reached the important part. "To my son Arthur Sterling," Mr. Harrison read aloud, adjusting his glasses, "I leave the 40 acres of prime commercial land located on Route 9, including the old farmhouse. This land is to be his sole property." I froze. The farmhouse? He gave it to Dad? My stomach dropped to the floor. Dad already had a huge mansion in the hills. He did not care about the memories in that old farmhouse. He only cared about the land it sat on because it was right next to the new highway project. Dad leaned back in his leather chair. A very proud, satisfied smile spread across his face. He crossed his legs, looking like a king who had just conquered a new country. "Of course," Dad said smoothly, fixing his expensive tie. "My father knew I had the sharp business mind to develop that land. It is the logical choice. Family legacy must be protected by the strongest hands." Mr. Harrison continued reading. "To my grandson Ryan Sterling, I leave the sum of $500,000 from my private investment accounts." Ryan pumped his fist quietly. "Finally, I can upgrade my boat," he whispered to himself, completely ignoring the fact that his grandfather was dead. My hands started to shake under the table. I waited for my name. Surely Grandpa had left me something to survive on. And finally, Mr. Harrison looked down at the paper, a slight frown appearing on his forehead. "To my granddaughter, Maya Sterling, I leave Lot 4B. The lawyer's office was dead silent. "Lot 4B? Ryan asked, looking confused. "What is that? A bank account?" Mr. Harrison pulled out a large map and pushed it across the shiny desk. "It is a 1/4-acre strip of dirt. It is tucked directly on the southern border of the main 40-acre property. It is essentially a long, narrow patch of rough land with no structures on it." I stared blindly at the map. It was just a tiny, useless line on the edge of Dad's massive new empire. A strip of dirt, no house, no money, just rocks, mud, and wild weeds. The silence in the room suddenly broke. Ryan let out a loud snort, covering his mouth to hide his laughter. But the worst reaction came from my father. Dad leaned forward. The respectable, loving father mask completely melted away. He looked right at me, and his eyes were filled with cruel, sharp amusement. The room erupted in his low, dark chuckle. He leaned close to my ear. I could smell the strong peppermint of his mouthwash. "Look at that, Maya," Dad smirked and whispered, his voice dripping with pure poison. "All those years you wiped his mouth, all those nights you stayed awake holding his hand. And he gave you the gutter." It felt like someone had violently punched me in the stomach. The pain and grief hit me so hard my vision blurred. The betrayal was not just in the legal document, it was right here, in my father's eyes. He was not sad for me, he was happy I got nothing. He enjoyed my humiliation. He loved seeing me broken. "He knew you could never handle real property, Maya," Dad added out loud, making sure Mr. Harrison heard him. "You are just too soft and emotional. Do not worry. Maybe you can pitch a small camping tent on your dirt road." Or, I can buy it from you for a few $100s when I bring the bulldozers in." At that exact moment, something deep inside my heart finally snapped. The little girl who always wanted her father's approval simply died. The desperate hope that he would one day love me vanished. I realized he was never going to be a real father to me. To him, I was just a useless servant. I looked down at the deed in front of me, Lot 4B. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not ask why. I slowly picked up the thick piece of paper. I folded the deed neatly into a perfect square. I opened my cheap purse and tucked it safely inside. Then I stood up. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Harrison," I said calmly. My voice was completely steady. I turned and looked at my father and brother. "Congratulations on your inheritance," I said, my face a blank wall. Before they could say another word, I smiled politely, quietly excused myself, and walked out the heavy wooden door. I walked out into the freezing December air. I had nothing but a piece of dirt and a broken heart. But for the first time in my life, the toxic chain was broken. It was Monday, January 15th, 2024. The time was exactly 8:30 p.m. I was sitting on the floor of my new home, a tiny drafty studio apartment on the bad side of town. The heater in the corner made a loud rattling noise, but the room was still freezing. I pulled my thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. On the small coffee table in front of me, my laptop screen glowed brightly in the dark room. Since the day in the lawyer's office 2 months ago, I had cut all contact with my dad and Ryan. To survive, I went back to my profession as a freelance graphic designer. To pay my $800 rent, I took a cheap contract job for a local real estate office. My job was simple. I took old messy paper maps of the city and turned them into clean digital 3D models on my computer. Suddenly, my cell phone buzzed on the table. The caller ID showed a picture of Aunt Clara. She was my dad's older sister. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Aunt Clara." "Oh, Maya, sweetie." Aunt Clara's voice was high and overly sweet, like too much sugar in a cup of tea. "I have been so worried about you, living in that dangerous neighborhood all alone. How are you eating?" "I am working, Aunt Clara. I am fine," I said quietly. "Well, I was just talking to your father," she continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "He is very hurt, Maya. He says you walked out of the lawyer's office without a word. You know he is under a lot of stress. He just signed a massive contract to sell Grandpa's 40 acres to Apex Corporate Builders for $15 million. I closed my eyes. The pain was still there, but I pushed it down. "I am glad he got what he wanted." "Maya, listen to me," Aunt Clara said, her tone changing to sound like a teacher scolding a child. "Your father is a good man. He is the head of our family. He even paid for my new roof last week. Yes, maybe he was a little harsh to you, but he believes in tough love. He thinks you need to learn how to survive in the real world. Tough love. That was the excuse they all used." "He humiliated me, Aunt Clara," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "He laughed at me." "Oh, you are just being too sensitive, dear," she sighed. "You always let your emotions control you. Look, just call him. Apologize for running off. If you say sorry, maybe he will give you a little money to buy a proper bed. Family is family, Maya. You have to swallow your pride." Right then, I understood exactly who Aunt Clara was. She was the enabler. She knew my dad was toxic. She knew he had treated me like dirt. But my dad had money, and he paid for her roof. So, she chose his side. She was perfectly happy to watch me suffer, as long as her own life was comfortable. "I have nothing to apologize for, Aunt Clara," I said, my voice suddenly very cold and very firm. "Goodbye." I hung up the phone. I did not cry. My tears had dried up weeks ago. Instead, I felt a strange, sharp energy wake up inside my chest. I looked at my purse on the floor. I reached inside and pulled out the thick, folded piece of paper, the deed to Lot 4B, the useless quarter-acre strip of dirt Grandpa had left me. Why? The question kept spinning in my head. Grandpa was not a cruel man. Even when his mind was foggy from the pain medicine, he always worried about my future. Why would he leave me a piece of garbage land while giving Dad a $15 million gold mine? I decided to use my design skills to find out. I carefully opened the deed. It had the exact GPS coordinates and property lines for Lot 4B. I typed those numbers into my graphic design mapping software. A green line appeared on my screen, showing my tiny strip of land. Next, because of my current freelance job, I had access to the city's official zoning maps for 2023. I downloaded the map for Route 9 and placed it over my green line. I zoomed in. I held my breath. My eyes moved across the glowing screen. The 40 acres my dad inherited was shaped like a giant bowl. On the north, east, and west sides of his land, The city map was colored bright blue. I clicked on the blue color. A text box popped up. Protected city wetlands. Federal law. No building, no paving, no construction allowed. My heart started to beat faster. If Dad could not build roads on the north, east, or west, how would the corporate developers get their heavy bulldozers into the 40 acres? How would they connect their new mega buildings to the main highway? I looked at the south side of the map. There, sitting perfectly between the main highway and Dad's $15 million land, was a tiny narrow green rectangle. It was the only dry, legally zoned ground that touched the public road. It was Lot 4B, my land. Grandpa had not given me the gutter, he had given me the gate. And I held the only key. My dad could sell his 40 acres for $100 million, but without my written legal permission to cross my tiny strip of dirt, those corporate builders could not move a single brick. Dad's land was completely landlocked. It was absolutely useless without me. I stared at the screen as the rain hit my apartment window. A slow, quiet smile spread across my face. Grandpa knew Dad would betray me, and from his hospital bed, he had planned the ultimate trap to protect me. It was Wednesday, March 6, 2024. The time was 2:15 p.m. The winter had been long, lonely, and bitterly cold. I spent the last 3 months in total exile. Every day, I ate cheap instant noodles and worked 12 hours on my laptop, building my freelance design business from scratch. I had blocked my dad, Ryan, and Aunt Clara on my phone. Sometimes, late at night, the silence of my tiny apartment felt heavy. I would remember Grandpa's warm smile, and the tears would finally fall. But the next morning, I would wash my face and go back to work. I was not the same scared girl who walked out of that lawyer's office. I was surviving. I was rebuilding. On this particular afternoon, I was sitting in room 204 of a very old, cheap office building on 5th Avenue. The carpet was stained, and the fluorescent lights above me hummed with a quiet, annoying buzz. Sitting across from me was Leo Vance. Leo was a 30-year-old real estate lawyer who had just started his own firm, Vance Legal Assisting. His desk was a total mess, covered in tall piles of paper and empty coffee cups. I met him 2 weeks ago when I was doing design work for the real estate agency next door. I did not have the money to hire a lawyer to verify my secret about Lot 4B. So, I made a very real, very grounded business deal with him. "Okay, Leo," I said, pointing to my laptop screen. "I completely redesigned your firm's website. It looks professional, clean, and modern. It will bring you high-paying clients. In exchange, I need you to do a full legal background check on this property deed. I need to know if my theory is 100% legally bulletproof." Leo smiled, looking at the shiny new website. "You do great work, Maya. A deal is a deal." He took my yellow folder. For the next 45 minutes, Leo did not say a word. He logged into the official county clerk's database. He pulled up environmental surveys, federal zoning laws, and property lines. I watched his face. Slowly, his casual smile disappeared. His eyes grew wide behind his glasses. He leaned closer to his computer screen, typing fast. "Maya," Leo finally said, taking a deep breath. His voice was completely serious. "Your grandfather was a genius." "So, I was right?" I asked, my heart beating fast against my ribs. "You were exactly right, but the reality is even bigger than you thought," Leo explained, turning his monitor so I could see. "Your dad's 40 acres are completely surrounded by the Blue Creek wetlands. Federal law strictly forbids laying asphalt or bringing heavy machinery over protected wetlands. The fine for doing so is massive, and the city will arrest anyone who tries." Leo pointed a pen at the tiny green rectangle on the map. "Lot 4B, your strip of dirt. It is the only land that connects the main highway to your father's property. In legal terms, this is called exclusive ingress and egress. Anyone who wants to enter your dad's land with a vehicle has to cross your dirt." "Can Dad just force me to let him use it?" I asked. I knew my father. He always found a way to win. He believed the rules did not apply to him because he was Arthur Sterling, the respected CEO. "No." Leo shook his head firmly. "That is the beautiful part. Your grandfather specifically wrote this deed as a closed easement. That means it belongs to you, and only you. The city cannot force you to open it. Your dad cannot force you. Without your written, signed, and legally notarized consent, Lot 4B is a brick wall." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The power of it washed over me. I was not helpless anymore. But Leo was not done. He pulled up another document on his screen. It had the bold logo of Apex Corporate Builders. "Since I was digging, I checked the public business filings for your dad's new mega deal," Leo said, his voice dropping lower. Your dad signed the final contract with Apex on February 1st. They are paying him $15 million for the land. But Maya, look at Clause 7. I leaned in and read the confusing legal text. Translate it for me, Leo. I only understand 5th grade English when it comes to lawyer talk, I said, rubbing my tired eyes. It means your dad signed a warranty of clear access, Leo explained. He legally promised Apex that there are no roadblocks to entering the land. Because he is so arrogant, he did not even bother to check the exact property lines of your dirt strip. He just assumed it was useless. Leo looked right into my eyes. The reality of the situation was heavy and dangerous. Maya, your dad already took a $3 million non-refundable cash advance from Apex, Leo whispered. He already spent a lot of it buying new company trucks and paying off his own debts. Apex is scheduled to start digging next month, in April. When they bring their bulldozers to the highway and realize they cannot cross your land, your dad will be in breach of contract. Apex will sue him for millions. He will lose everything. I sat back in my hard plastic chair. The room was dead silent except for the buzzing light above. My father had mocked me. He had laughed at me in the lawyer's office, thinking he had won. He genuinely believed he was a smart, superior man providing for his family, and that I was just a weak, emotional failure. Thank you, Leo, I said quietly. I felt a strange sense of peace. What do we do now? Leo smiled, a sharp, loyal smile. He was no longer just a lawyer. He was the first member of my real team, my chosen family. Now, Leo said, closing the laptop, we sit back, we let the clock run out, and we wait for the bulldozers to hit the wall. It was Monday, April 15, 2024. The time was exactly 6:45 a.m. The morning air was foggy and bitterly cold. I was sitting in the passenger seat of Leo's dusty Honda Civic. We were parked in the parking lot of a small gas station right across the street from the main highway, Route 9. I held a cheap cup of black coffee in my hands to keep my fingers warm. Across the road, the $15 million mega build was supposed to begin. At exactly 7 a.m., the ground shook. 4 massive, bright yellow bulldozers with the Apex Corporate Builders logo rolled down the highway. Behind them were 3 heavy dump trucks and a large trailer carrying steel pipes. The loud roar of their diesel engines filled the quiet morning air. Here they come, Leo whispered, taking a sip of his coffee. The heavy machines turned their wheels, aiming right for the narrow strip of dirt, Lot 4B, my land. But before the first bulldozer could touch the mud, a white pickup truck with flashing yellow lights blocked their path. The door opened, and a man in a neon yellow vest stepped out. It was City Zoning Inspector Davis. He held a thick clipboard and a large city map. Leo and I rolled our windows down just a little to hear. The Apex site manager jumped out of his truck, looking annoyed. He pointed toward my dad's 40 acres. Inspector Davis firmly shook his head. He pointed a thick finger at his map, then pointed straight down at the dirt. I could hear the faint sound of the inspector shouting over the engine noise. Private easement, federal wetland borders. You cannot cross without the owner's signature. 10 minutes later, a shiny black Mercedes pulled up to the site. My father stepped out. He was wearing an expensive gray suit and a bright red tie. He had a big, confident smile on his face, probably expecting to take a victory photo for the local newspaper. He walked up to the site manager and the city inspector, acting like he owned the whole world. Through the car window, I watched his body language change. The inspector showed my dad the map. My dad waved his hand dismissively, as if the rules did not apply to him. He pointed at the dirt road, then at his own chest, trying to use his respectable CEO charm, but the inspector did not smile. The inspector simply crossed his arms and shook his head again. The Apex site manager threw his hard hat on the ground, clearly furious. He yelled something at my dad, pulled out his cell phone, and walked away to call his corporate bosses. Suddenly, my dad's confident mask completely shattered. His face turned bright red. He looked around wildly, staring at the empty dirt strip. The bulldozers slowly turned their engines off. The loud roar died down to dead silence. The mega deal was officially halted. Right on cue, my cell phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen flashed. Dad. I took a deep breath. My heart was beating so hard it hurt my ribs. I picked up the phone and answered. I did not say hello. I just listened. Maya, Dad's voice barked through the speaker. He was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the tight panic in his throat. There is a ridiculous clerical error at the construction site. The city inspector is being extremely difficult. I need you to come down here right now. Just sign a quick waiver for your little dirt patch so we can get to work. Hurry up, I have very important people waiting. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize for the last 5 months of silence. He just gave me an order, fully expecting his obedient scapegoat daughter to come running. He genuinely believed I was just being childish and that this was a simple mistake. "It is not an error, Dad," I said quietly, my voice perfectly smooth. "It is my land, and no one is crossing it." There was a meaningful pause on the phone. "Maya, stop playing these games," Dad said, his voice dropping into that dark, manipulative tone he used to make me feel small. "This is family business. Do you know how much money is on the line here? I am your father, and I am telling you to come here and fix this. You owe me." A tear slipped down my cheek, but it was not a tear of sadness. It was a tear of final release. The last tiny thread of hope that he loved me was gone. "I don't owe you anything," I replied softly. "You laughed at me in the lawyer's office, remember? You said Grandpa gave me the gutter. Well, Dad, enjoy your view from the gutter. Maya, listen to me right now." I pressed the red button and hung up. I placed the phone face down on my lap. Across the street, I watched my father pull the phone away from his ear. He stared at it in pure shock. For the first time in his entire life, his control over me was completely broken. He looked up at the giant silent bulldozers that were now trapped behind my invisible brick wall. Leo looked at me and smiled gently. "You did great. Are you okay?" I wiped my cheek, took a deep breath of the cold morning air, and nodded. "Yes, let's go to work." As Leo started the car and drove away, my phone started ringing again. This time it was Ryan. The enablers were waking up. The real storm was just beginning. It was Friday, May 3rd, 2024. The time was exactly 4 p.m. 2 weeks had passed since the bulldozers were stopped at the highway. For 14 days, my phone did not stop ringing. Aunt Clara left crying voicemails, begging me to stop hurting my father. Dad sent angry text messages, ordering me to call his lawyers. I ignored all of them. I was busy working on my design projects and building a solid legal plan with Leo. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, typing on my laptop, when someone knocked loudly on my apartment door. I looked through the small peephole. It was my brother, Ryan. He did not look like the confident golden child anymore. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and he looked tired. In his hand he held a white paper bag from a very expensive bakery downtown. I unlocked the door but left the metal chain attached. "What do you want, Ryan?" "Maya, please, just let me in," Ryan said. His voice was soft, trying to sound like a caring older brother. "I brought your favorite blueberry muffins. We need to talk. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no dad, just family." I looked at his fake, sad eyes. A year ago I would have opened the door immediately, desperate for my brother's love. Now, I just felt a cold disgust. I unhooked the chain and let him in. Ryan looked around my tiny, freezing apartment. His nose wrinkled in disgust for a second before he forced a warm smile. He placed the bakery bag on my cheap table. "Maya, you cannot live like this," Ryan said, acting worried. "Look at this place. Dad is just worried about you. He wants to help you. He is ready to offer you $50,000 for that dirt strip. You can move to a nice apartment. You can buy new clothes. You will never have to worry again." $50,000. For a piece of land that was stopping a $15 million deal. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was still the weak little girl who would take crumbs from the table. "The land is not for sale, Ryan," I said calmly, crossing my arms. Ryan's warm smile slipped a little. He took a step closer. "Maya, be reasonable. Dad is under extreme pressure. Apex Corporate Builders filed a massive $5 million lawsuit against him yesterday for breach of contract. The bank is threatening to take his company. His blood pressure is dangerously high. Do you really want to be the reason your own father has a heart attack?" There it was, the classic family manipulation. He was turning me into the villain. "Dad brought this on himself," I replied, looking directly into his eyes. "He signed a contract promising a clear road, but he didn't own the road. That is his bad business choice, not mine." Ryan's face turned red. The loving brother act completely vanished. He hit his hand hard against my kitchen table. "You greedy, selfish little brat," Ryan yelled, his voice echoing in the small room. "You don't understand anything. Dad had to sell that land. Do you know how much debt the company is in? He had to use Grandpa's private medical trust fund just to keep the business floating." The room went dead silent. My heart completely stopped. I stared at him. "What did you just say?" Ryan froze. He realized he had just spoken the biggest, darkest family secret out loud. He swallowed hard, stepping back toward the door. I mean, Grandpa had a medical trust fund?" I asked. My voice was shaking, not from fear, but from a deep, burning anger. "When Grandpa first got sick 4 years ago, Dad told everyone that Grandpa was completely broke. Dad said he could not afford to hire a professional nurse. He sat me down and gave me a long speech about family duty. He made me feel guilty for having a career. He told me it was my job as the daughter to take care of Grandpa for free, to bathe him, feed him, and watch him suffer in pain while I ruined my own life and savings. "Get out," I whispered. My hands were balled into tight fists. "Maya, listen, get out," I screamed, pointing at the door. Ryan hurried out into the hallway, leaving the muffins behind. I slammed the door and locked it. My legs felt weak. I slid down the wooden door and sat on the floor. The betrayal was so deep it felt like a knife in my chest. Dad didn't just mock me, he didn't just steal the farmhouse. For 4 years he lied. He had Grandpa's money. He used the medical money to save his own failing business, and he used me as free slave labor to cover it up. Aunt Clara knew. Ryan knew. They all sat at Thanksgiving dinners, praising Dad for his hard work, while I was exhausted in the other room, cleaning Grandpa's bedpan. I grabbed my phone and called Leo. He answered on the first ring. "Leo," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. My voice was sharp and cold like ice. "I need you to use your legal access. I need you to find the bank records for Arthur Sterling from 4 years ago. Specifically, a medical trust fund for William Sterling." "Maya, what is going on?" Yanana, hearing the intensity in my voice. "My dad didn't just make a real estate mistake, Leo," I said, staring at the empty wall. "He committed financial abuse against an elderly person, and I am going to prove it. Grandpa knew the secret. That was why he left me the key to destroying Dad's empire." The game was no longer just about land. It was about justice. It was Tuesday, May 14, 2024. The time was exactly 11:15 p.m. The heavy rain was hitting the glass window of Leo's office. The room smelled like stale coffee and old pizza. The only sound was the loud mechanical hum of Leo's printer spitting out pages. We had been sitting here for 6 hours. My eyes were burning from staring at the computer screen, but I could not stop. "Okay, I found it," Leo said softly. His voice cut through the quiet room. He did not smile. He looked completely sick. He pulled a thick stack of papers from the printer and walked over to my desk. He placed them gently in front of me. At the top of the page was the logo for Oakwood National Bank. "How did you get this, Leo?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I thought bank records were private." "They are," Leo explained, sitting down across from me. He looked very serious. "But since your grandfather passed away, his entire estate had to go through the county probate court. Because you are a named heir in his will, you have the legal right to request the full financial history of his accounts. I filed the paperwork on Monday. The court clerk just emailed me the official file." Leo pointed his pen at the first page. "Your grandfather set up the William Sterling Care Trust in 2018. It was a special medical fund meant to pay for professional 24-hour nursing care in case he ever got sick." "How much was in it?" I asked, feeling my chest tighten. $450,000, Leo said quietly. I stared at the number on the paper. $450,000 uncio. It felt like a heavy stone dropping into my stomach. "Now look at the second page," Leo instructed, turning the paper over. He highlighted a specific date with a yellow marker, October 15, 2019. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered that exact week. It was the week Grandpa had his first major stroke. It was the week I was packing up my beautiful city apartment, crying on the floor because I had to quit my dream job at a top design agency. I was terrified. I remembered Dad coming to my apartment that day. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder and gave me his famous speech. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "Maya, Grandpa is completely broke. We have no money for nurses. The family business is struggling. I need you to do your duty. We must all sacrifice." I believed him. I gave up my entire life because I thought it was my duty. "What happened on October 15, 2019, Leo?" I asked, even though I already knew the horrible answer. "On that exact day, your dad used his legal power as Grandpa's power of attorney," Leo said, his voice hard with anger. "He emptied the entire medical trust. He transferred all $450,000 into the main operating account of his company, Sterling Supplies. He labeled it as a business loan. He used a sick, dying man's money to pay off his own corporate debts. And to cover it up, he used you as free, unpaid medical labor for 4 years." A cold, sharp tear fell from my eye and landed perfectly on the bank statement. It was not just a toxic family dynamic anymore. It was not just a cruel father picking his favorite son. This was a calculated, selfish crime. He stole Grandpa's money to save his public image as a successful CEO, and he watched me suffer every single day to hide his secret. "This is elder financial abuse, Maya," Leo said gently, placing a supportive hand on my arm. He was no longer just a lawyer. He was a true friend, my chosen family. It is a felony. If we take these documents to the district attorney, your father will go to prison. He will lose the business, the land, and his freedom. I touched the cold paper. All the late nights, the back pain from lifting Grandpa out of bed, the smell of hospital soap, the loneliness, all of it flashed through my mind. Just then, my cell phone buzzed on the desk. It was a new email. The subject line read, "Urgent, family dinner, Friday night." I opened it. It was from Aunt Clara. The message was sent to me, Dad, Ryan, and our extended cousins. "Dear family, Arthur is going through a terrible crisis right now. The company is in danger because of a terrible misunderstanding with Maya. I am hosting a mandatory family dinner at my house this Friday at 7 p.m. Maya, you must attend. We will sit down as a loving family, pray together, and convince you to sign the land waiver. It is time to stop this childish rebellion and save our family's good name." I read the email twice. A dark, quiet calmness washed over me. They wanted a family gathering. They wanted to put me in a room surrounded by enablers, corner me, and use guilt and shame to force me to surrender my dirt road. Dad was getting desperate because the Apex lawsuit was destroying him, and he wanted to use the whole family to break me. I looked up at Leo. The weak, crying girl was gone. "Print 3 more copies of everything," I said, my voice completely steady and cold. Leo smiled, a sharp, ready smile. "Are we going to the police?" "No," I replied, folding the bank statement and putting it in my bag right next to the deed for Lot 4B. "We are going to dinner. It is time to pull off his mask in front of everyone." It was Friday, May 17th, 2024. The time was exactly 6:55 p.m. I stood on the front porch of Aunt Clara's large, expensive house in the rich suburbs. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and expensive perfume. I was wearing a simple, clean black blazer. Under my arm I held a thick yellow folder. Standing right beside me was Leo. He wore a sharp blue suit and carried a small leather briefcase. He was not here to speak for me. He was here as a witness and as proof that I was no longer fighting alone. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Aunt Clara opened the door. She was wearing a bright floral dress and a pearl necklace. Her face was stretched into a giant fake smile. "Maya, oh my sweet girl, you came." Aunt Clara reached out to hug me, but then she stopped. Her eyes moved to the tall man standing next to me. The fake smile slowly dropped. Maya. "Who is this?" I said this was a private family dinner. "This is Leo Vance," I said, my voice completely calm and flat. "He is my lawyer. He is staying." Aunt Clara's face turned slightly red. "Maya, please, we don't need outsiders. This is just family trying to heal. Your father is very sensitive right now." "Leo stays, Aunt Clara," I replied, looking directly into her eyes without blinking. "Or I walk back to the car right now." Aunt Clara swallowed hard. She stepped aside. "Fine, come in." We walked into the formal dining room. The table was covered in a white lace cloth. There were shiny silver plates, crystal water glasses, and a huge roasted chicken in the middle. The whole room smelled like rich food and fake peace. My father was sitting at the head of the table. He looked like a tired king. He rubbed his forehead, playing the part of the stressed, loving father perfectly. Ryan was sitting on his right, playing with his phone. Uncle Henry and a few other cousins were sitting quietly. They were the enablers, the audience Dad had invited to watch me surrender. When I walked in, Dad looked up. He saw Leo, and his jaw tightened for a single second, but he quickly forced a gentle, sad smile. "Maya," Dad sighed loudly, shaking his head. "You brought a lawyer to a family dinner? Does my own daughter really think I am her enemy?" I pulled out a chair and sat down at the opposite end of the table. Leo sat next to me. "Hello, Dad." "Let's not argue tonight," Uncle Henry chimed in, pouring a glass of wine. "We are family. Family sticks together through hard times. Arthur, tell her what you told us." Dad leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. He looked around the room, making sure everyone was watching his performance. "Maya," Dad began, his voice soft and full of fake pain. "I know you are angry. I know the will was a shock. But you have to understand, Grandpa was not thinking clearly at the end. Giving you that tiny dirt road was just a mistake. Now, because of your stubbornness, my entire company is dying. Apex Builders is suing me. Innocent people might lose their jobs." He paused, letting his words sink in. He was trying to make me feel guilty. He was trying to make me feel like a monster. "But I forgive you," Dad continued, pulling a piece of paper from his jacket pocket and sliding it across the table. "I really do. You are young and emotional. Just sign this waiver." Let the bulldozers cross the land. If you do this tonight, I will write you a check for $50,000, and we can be a real family again." Ryan nodded. "Take the deal, Maya. Stop ruining everything." I looked at the piece of paper. It was the warranty of clear access. If I signed it, Dad would get his $15 million, he would save his public image, and I would disappear back into the shadows. The room was completely silent. Everyone was staring at me. Aunt Clara held her breath. Uncle Henry watched with wide eyes. They all expected the scapegoat to put her head down and obey. I slowly reached out and picked up his paper. Dad smiled, a true arrogant smirk forming on his lips. He thought he had won. He thought I was finally broken. Instead of signing it, I ripped the paper perfectly in half. The loud RRIEP echoed in the quiet dining room. Dad's smile vanished instantly. His face turned dark red. "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" "I am not signing your waiver, Dad," I said smoothly. I dropped the torn pieces onto my empty dinner plate. "But I did bring some papers of my own." I opened the thick yellow folder I had brought with me. I pulled out the stack of bank records from Oakwood National Bank and placed them right in the middle of the table, next to the roasted chicken. "Since we are talking about Grandpa's mistakes," I said, my voice rising just enough to fill the room, "I think we should talk about October 15th, 2019. Dad's face suddenly turned completely white. The color drained from his cheeks like a ghost. He stared at the bank logo on the top page. The real dinner was about to begin. It was Friday, May 17th, 2024. The time was exactly 7:15 p.m. The expensive dining room was so quiet that I could hear the heavy rain hitting the glass windows outside. The delicious smell of the roasted chicken suddenly felt sickening. Nobody moved. Everyone was staring at the thick stack of bank papers sitting in the middle of the table. My father was completely frozen. The warm, loving smile was gone. His face was pale, and a single drop of sweat rolled down his forehead. For the very first time in his life, he had no clever excuse ready. Uncle Henry slowly reached his hand out. His fingers were shaking a little as he picked up the top page. He adjusted his glasses and read the bank logo. "Arthur," Uncle Henry said, his voice full of confusion. "What is this? This says William Sterling Care Trust. It says there was $450,000 in it." "Give me that," Dad suddenly shouted, reaching across the table to snatch the paper. But Leo, sitting calmly next to me, gently placed his hand on the rest of the stack, stopping my dad from taking them all. "Let him read it, Dad," I said. My voice was low, smooth, and completely fearless. "Let the whole family read what you did on October 15th, 2019. Aunt Clara looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "Maya, sweetie, what are you talking about? What happened on that date?" "That was the exact day Dad came to my apartment," I explained, looking right at Aunt Clara. "That was the day Grandpa had his first bad stroke. Dad sat on my couch and cried. He told me Grandpa was completely broke. He told me the family business was failing. He said we had no money to hire a professional nurse." I paused, letting the memory fill the room. I pointed to the paper in Uncle Henry's hand. "But that was a lie," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "Grandpa had almost $500,000 saved just for his medical care. But Dad secretly transferred every single penny into his own company's bank account. He stole a dying man's money to pay off his own corporate debts. And to cover up his crime, he used me. He made me quit my career. He made me work as a free nurse for 4 years. A loud gasp escaped Aunt Clara's mouth. She covered her face with both hands. "No, Arthur, tell me this is not true. Tell me you didn't steal from your own sick father." Dad slammed both of his hands flat on the wooden table. The crystal water glasses shook. "It was a business loan," Dad roared. His face was now bright red with pure anger. The respectable CEO mask was completely shattered. He looked wild and desperate. "I was saving our family legacy. Do you think money just grows on trees? Sterling Supplies is our name. If the company died, we all would have looked like total failures in this town." He pointed a shaking finger at me, trying to turn it around and make me the bad guy, just like he always did. "I am the provider," Dad yelled, his voice echoing in the dining room. "I make the hard choices. I put a roof over your heads. Grandpa was going to die anyway. Why waste $500,000 on hospital beds and nurses when that money could save my company? I did what a strong man has to do." The room was completely silent again. Nobody was looking at him with respect anymore. Uncle Henry looked at him with pure disgust. Aunt Clara was crying silently. Even Ryan, the golden child, looked down at his empty plate, too embarrassed to defend him. He didn't care about Grandpa's pain. He didn't care about my ruined life. He only cared about his image. He truly believed that his company was more important than human beings. You didn't do it for the family, Dad, I said quietly, feeling a deep, heavy peace inside my heart. You did it for your own ego. You wanted everyone in town to think you were a rich, smart businessman, but you were just a thief. You disrespectful little brat, Dad hissed, his voice turning dark and poisonous. He took a step toward me. I am your father. You will give me that land, and you will give me those original bank papers right now, or I swear to God. Before he could finish his threat, Leo stood up. He did not yell. He just calmly buttoned his blue suit jacket and looked my dad right in the eyes. Mr. Sterling, Leo said, his voice completely professional and sharp. My client is holding certified bank records proving you committed elder financial abuse. That is a Class 2 felony. If you take one more step toward her, or if you ever threaten her again, I will personally walk these papers to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. You will not just lose your $15 million deal with Apex. You will spend the next 10 years in federal prison. Dad stopped. His whole body went completely still. He looked at Leo, then he looked at the papers, and finally he looked at me. For 28 years he had controlled me with fear and guilt, but looking at him now, I did not feel scared. I just saw a weak, selfish old man who was trapped in his own web of lies. The dinner is over, I said, standing up from my chair. I picked up my yellow folder and tucked it safely under my arm. I looked at Aunt Clara, Uncle Henry, and Ryan. You all stood by and watched him treat me like dirt. You are all part of this, but the game ends tonight. I turned my back on my father and walked toward the front door. I had the land, I had the proof, and for the first time in my life, I had all the power. It was Tuesday, August 20, 2024. The time was exactly 10 a.m. 3 months had passed since the terrible family dinner. The hot summer sun was shining brightly through the large glass window of a nice downtown coffee shop. I was sitting in a comfortable armchair, drinking a warm vanilla latte. For the first time in 4 years, I did not feel a heavy weight on my chest. I felt light, I felt safe. On the table in front of me was the morning edition of the local business newspaper. The front page headline was printed in bold black letters, Sterling Supplies Files for Corporate Bankruptcy. CEO Arthur Sterling loses 40-acre mega deal. I looked at the black and white picture of my father under the headline. He looked 10 years older. His expensive suit looked slightly messy, and the confident, arrogant smile was completely gone. After I walked out of Aunt Clara's house that rainy night, Dad's fake empire crumbled very fast. Because I refused to sign the waiver for Lot 4B, the bulldozers never crossed my dirt road. The Apex corporate builders canceled the $15 million deal, but they did not stop there. They sued my father for the $3 million cash advance he had already spent. Because Dad had no money left, the bank stepped in. They seized his company, his fancy house in the hills, and the 40 acres of Grandpa's land. Everything he stole, everything he lied for, was gone in just 90 days. "Good morning, Maya," a familiar, friendly voice said. I looked up. Leo pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. He placed a thick, official-looking legal folder on the table. He was smiling. "Good morning, Leo," I smiled back. "Is it finished?" "It is officially finished," Leo nodded, tapping the folder with his fingers. "The ink is dry. The judge signed it this morning. When the bank took the 40 acres from my dad, they immediately sold it to Apex Corporate Builders for a very low price. But Apex still had a major problem. They still could not build anything without crossing my dirt road. So, last month, the CEO of Apex invited me and Leo to a meeting. They were not angry. They were businessmen. They knew I held all the power. They offered me $1 million in cash for Lot 4B. I said no. Instead, I made a very grounded, realistic counteroffer. I told them I did not want to be a millionaire. I just wanted what was stolen from me. I told Apex they could have full legal access to the dirt road forever, but they had to give me the old farmhouse and the 2 acres of land surrounding it. I also asked for a small cash payment of $100,000 to fix the roof and pay my legal fees. Because the farmhouse was on the far edge of the 40 acres, Apex happily agreed. It was a cheap price to save their massive project. "Here is the new deed, Maya," Leo said gently, sliding a crisp white paper across the table. "The farmhouse is legally yours. No one can ever take it from you." I touched the paper. Tears filled my eyes, but they were happy tears. Grandpa's promise finally came true. You will always have a safe place to rest your head. Right at that moment, my cell phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was Ryan. I had blocked his number months ago, but he was calling from a new, unknown number. I took a deep breath, swiped the screen, and put the phone on speaker so Leo could hear. "Hello?" I said calmly. "Maya, please don't hang up." Ryan's voice came through the speaker. He sounded pathetic, weak, and completely desperate. He was no longer the arrogant golden child who laughed at my inheritance. "What do you want, Ryan?" I asked. "I have nothing, Maya," Ryan cried softly. "Dad is broke. He moved into a cheap motel. The bank took my Tesla because Dad missed the payments. My credit cards are blocked. Aunt Clara won't even answer my calls because she doesn't want to give us money." It was the ugly reality of enablers. They only stick around when things are good. Once the money and power disappeared, the perfect family completely abandoned each other. "I heard you made a deal with Apex," Ryan continued, his voice shaking. "I heard you got the farmhouse and some cash. Maya, please. I am your brother. I can't live like this. Can I come stay with you? Just for a few months? Can you lend me $10,000? A year ago, I would have felt so guilty. I would have drained my bank account to save him, just hoping he would finally love me. But I was not that girl anymore. I understood that DNA is just biology. Blood does not mean loyalty." "No, Ryan," I said. My voice was not angry. It was just an empty, firm boundary. "You sat in that lawyer's office and laughed at me. You knew Dad stole Grandpa's medical money, and you ate Thanksgiving dinner with him while I was cleaning bedpans. You chose your side. Maya, you can't just leave me on the street. We are family," he begged, his voice cracking. "We share parents, Ryan. We are not family," I replied smoothly. "Do not call this number again. I wish you the best of luck." I pressed the red button and ended the call. I did not feel sad. I looked at Leo. He gave me a proud, quiet nod. He was my real family now. The people who fight for you, the people who respect you, that is your true family. "Are you ready to go see your new home?" Leo asked, standing up. I picked up the deed to the farmhouse, smiled, and stood up. "Yes. Let's go home." It was Thursday, November 28th, 2024. The time was exactly 2 p.m. It was Thanksgiving Day. Outside the old farmhouse, the wind was cold, and the brown autumn leaves blew across the grass. But inside, it was perfectly warm. The house smelled like sweet cinnamon, baked apples, and roasting turkey. I was standing in my new kitchen. It was not a fancy modern kitchen like the one in my dad's old mansion. The wooden cabinets were chipped, and the stove was old. I had spent $25,000 of my settlement money to fix the broken roof and install a new heater. It was simple, but it was mine. Every single corner of this house felt safe. My graphic design business was doing very well. Just yesterday I had signed a new $4,000 contract with a local school. I did not need millions of dollars to be happy. I just needed peace. The front door opened, and a cold breeze rushed in. Leo walked inside, carrying a heavy load of chopped firewood in his arms. Right behind him was Buster, a small, messy rescue dog I had adopted from the city animal shelter 2 weeks ago. Buster ran straight to the kitchen, happily wagging his tail. "I got the wood for the fireplace," Leo smiled, dropping the logs into the metal basket. His cheeks were red from the cold air. Over the last 3 months, Leo had become my best friend, my business partner, and my chosen family. We respected each other. There were no games, no lies, and no manipulation. "Thank you," I smiled back, handing him a hot mug of coffee. "Oh, I also checked the mailbox at the end of the dirt road," Leo said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a few bills and one crumpled, cheap white envelope. He looked at the envelope carefully. His smile faded. "Maya, there is no return address. But I think you should look at the handwriting." I wiped my hands on my kitchen towel and took the envelope. My heart did a tiny jump, but it did not panic like it used to. The handwriting was messy and shaking, but I knew those sharp letters anywhere. It was from my father. I walked into the living room and sat down on the soft, comfortable sofa. The fire crackled in the fireplace. Buster jumped up and rested his warm head on my lap. I slowly opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of lined notebook paper. "Dear Maya, I am writing this from a cheap, dirty room at the Starlight Motel. It is Thanksgiving, and I am completely alone. Ryan moved to another state and blocked my number. Aunt Clara refuses to speak to me because she is embarrassed that the whole town knows about the bankruptcy. My friends at the country club pretend they do not know me. I have lost everything. My money, my company, and my respect. My health is failing. The doctor says my blood pressure is dangerously high. I have had a lot of time to think. I know I was harsh on you. But you have to understand, Maya. The pressure of being a CEO was destroying me. I took your grandfather's money because I panicked. I just wanted to save the family name. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I pushed away the only person who actually cared about me. I am sorry. Please, I am an old, sick man. I am your father. Call me. Let me come to the farmhouse for dinner today. Let us be a family again. Love, Dad. I read the letter twice. A year ago, a letter like this would have made me cry. I would have dropped my cooking, grabbed my car keys, and rushed to that dirty motel to save him. I would have believed that his apology was real, but looking at the paper now, I saw the ugly truth. Even at rock bottom, he was still making excuses. I was harsh. I panicked. I wanted to save the family name. He was still trying to justify his crime. He didn't miss me. He missed having a scapegoat. He missed having a free nurse to take care of him now that he was sick and broke. What does it say? Leo asked quietly, sitting down next to me. He says he is sorry, I answered, my voice calm and smooth. He wants to come here for dinner. He says he is lonely. Are you going to invite him? Leo asked gently. He did not judge me. He just waited to support whatever choice I made. I looked at the letter. I felt a small bit of pity for him, but I felt absolutely no guilt. My father had made his choices. He built his empire on lies, and now he had to live in the ruins. No, I said, folding the letter neatly. Forgiveness does not mean I have to open my door to poison. DNA is just biology, Leo. Having the same blood does not make someone your family. I stood up and walked over to the fireplace. I dropped the white letter right into the bright orange flames. We watched the paper turn black and burn away into ashes. The heavy chain that had tied me to Arthur Sterling was finally, completely gone. I turned around, looked at Leo, and smiled a warm, genuine smile. Now can you please help me set the table? Our Thanksgiving turkey is almost ready. It was Tuesday, May 12, 2025. The time was exactly 10:15 a.m. The heavy winter snow was completely gone, replaced by the bright, warm green of spring. I was sitting on the wooden front porch of the old farmhouse. The morning sun felt incredibly warm on my face. The air smelled like fresh grass and wet soil. At my feet, my rescue dog Buster was sleeping quietly, his tail doing a lazy thump against the wooden floorboards. I held my laptop on my knees. I was reviewing a final 3D digital map for a new city park downtown. My freelance design business was no longer just a small side job. I now had 8 steady clients. Just yesterday, my bank account hit $12,400 in savings. It was not $15 million. I did not drive a fancy Tesla or wear shiny gold watches, but for the first time in my life, every single dollar was honest, and it was mine. I looked up from my screen and stared out toward the edge of my property. About 200 yards away, separated by a tall, beautiful wooden fence I had built in March, was the newly paved road for Apex Corporate Builders. Big delivery trucks drove quietly up and down the road. They never crossed onto my grass. They never bothered me. The legal boundary Grandpa had drawn on that map was now a physical, permanent wall protecting my peace. My cell phone buzzed on the small porch table. It was a text message from an unknown number, but I recognized the writing style immediately. It was from Aunt Clara. I had not spoken to her since the terrible family dinner a year ago. Maya, it is Aunt Clara. I know you changed your number, but Uncle Henry gave me this one. Your father had a stroke last night. He is at the Westside County Hospital, room 210. The state took away his motel room because he could not pay the $400 weekly rent. He has no money for private care. The doctors say he will be put into a cheap, state-run nursing home. He is crying. Please, Maya. You won. He is broken. Just come see him. I stared at the glowing screen for a long time. The world around me felt very still. A year ago, reading those words would have sent me into a blind panic. I would have felt the heavy, crushing guilt pushing down on my chest. I would have dropped my laptop, driven to room 210, and spent the next 10 years wiping his mouth, just like I did for Grandpa. I felt a small sting of human sadness. He was not a cartoon monster with red eyes. He was just a sad, arrogant man who loved his ego more than his own children. He had stolen Grandpa's $450,000 medical fund to look like a hero, and now, by a tragic twist of fate, he had absolutely nothing to pay for his own medical care. The universe had given him the exact life he forced Grandpa to live. I took a deep, slow breath. I did not feel angry anymore. But I also did not feel guilty. Real life does not always end with a big, crying hug. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is lock the door and walk away. I pressed the small delete button on my phone. The message disappeared forever. Then, I blocked the number. The boundary was made of steel. I would not let the toxic poison back into my clean house. Just then, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway broke the silence. It was Leo's dusty Honda Civic. He parked near the porch and stepped out. He was carrying 2 large cardboard cups of coffee from the bakery in town, and a thick brown folder. He wore his usual messy tie, and a warm, easy smile. Over the last year, Leo had moved his small legal office to the town square nearby. We had Sunday dinner together every single week. Good morning, Leo called out, walking up the porch steps. He handed me a cup of coffee. It smelled perfectly sweet, just the way I liked it. Good morning, I smiled, taking a sip. What is in the folder? Dan din fingenjinding tanmumbi, the final contract for your city park design, Leo said proudly, sitting in the rocking chair next to me. Buster woke up and immediately put his head on Leo's knee to get a scratch. The mayor signed it this morning. You are getting paid $4,500 on Friday. You did it, Maya. I looked at the folder, then at Leo, and then out at the beautiful quiet land Grandpa had saved for me. No, Leo, I said softly, feeling a deep warmth in my chest. We did it. For 28 years I was told that blood was everything. I was taught that you must suffer and let your family destroy you just because you share the same DNA. But sitting here on this sunny porch, I finally understood the truth. DNA is just biology. Blood simply makes you related. Loyalty, respect, and kindness. That is what makes a real family. A real family does not mock you when you are given a strip of dirt. A real family stands beside you and helps you build a castle on it. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and drank my coffee. The toxic equilibrium was completely broken. The scapegoat was gone. I was just Maya now. And for the rest of my life, I was going to be perfectly fine.